And we're live. Cool, we're live now. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining this office hour. As I said, deliverability is something I feel like most people in the community don't exactly know how to deal with. We're all just winging it until it blows up in our face. So today we have Errol to talk about it. Errol, thank you for joining us. Very happy for you to be with us here. Maybe let's start with the big picture. So who is Errol? How did he get into deliverability? And what should we expect from this talk?
Yeah, so my background, I've been technology for 15 years. I've been running my own SaaS companies for over 10 years. Email was always the backbone of my funnels. So it's something that I experienced very early on, really believed in. I mean, at the very start of my career, I started off in digital marketing ads, and email is just another ad format. It's the most efficient ad format still, even today. So I went all in on it. How I got into this deliverability thing is, I come from a technical background, and for me, like, I want to know, I'm always asking myself the question, how do I make the systems that I have better? And the thing is, you can't make something better unless you understand the intricacies of how it works. And I paid a lot of vendors a lot of money for a really long time, and I would just keep asking, like, okay, should I do this or should I do this? Or why does this work? Or how does it work? Or if it goes like this, is it different, or is it different than this? And what I was confronted with was a lot of gaslighting, like a lot of people either just dismissing the question or saying, uh, you know, uh, you're overthinking it, or I've done this. Yeah, usually what they would say is like, oh, I've sent 5 million emails, I know how this works, which is not an answer. So after years of basically paying all these experts for their tools and services, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go figure this out on my own, because I'm sick and tired of paying for something that is giving me something that I have no way of quantifying, and I have no idea of way of knowing if it's working. So this was just like kind of like a hobby thing that I started. It took kind of like 2 years of running experiments, and we could talk about that, why that was, but about 2 years of running experiments to really get to the heart of how this works, why it works. And once you kind of have a framework of what it is, I think you can start to make a lot of good choices. And I think, to your last question of like, what are we hoping to get out of today? I would consider it successful if a lot of the really smart people here, really technical people, are like, okay, he didn't give me like a rule that I blindly follow, but now I know how to think about the problem. And so I can start to apply my own judgment and run my own experiments.
Sounds good. Super clear. Now, this is the first of a two-part event series, right? This first event, we're going to talk about what Errol calls email 2.0, and the next one will be 3.0. So today we'll understand in the process what the difference between the two is, right? But let's maybe first dive into the classic email world. Let's take some myths and try to bust them together, if that works for you, Errol.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. I'll move to the next slide, and then it's all yours.
Yeah, so I guess, we came up with a pretty dramatic, title, Everything That You Know Is Wrong. I think, just to preface it before we go into some of these examples, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So when you look at a lot of these things that we've been doing and implementing, it's one thing to say, oh, this is all completely wrong. Some of it is right and it works, but probably not for the reasons that you think. And in what I've found in my experiments, and then also going from experiments to testing this in production for my marketing campaigns, you can basically ignore all of these rules and still be very successful with deliverability. So these are just a few examples that I'll go into to kind of set the scene and give you guys an idea of why we should be challenging all these things that these so-called experts on LinkedIn, who are trying to get clicks and views and invitations and lead referral fees, why we shouldn't blindly accept what they're saying. So just to the group, these are all best practices that I think just about everybody would say they've seen or know and follow, correct? All right. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about some of the experiments I run and what I found. So first of all, don't track email opens. So the conventional wisdom behind this is that only marketers track opens, and so this pixel is a dead giveaway that you are a marketer, and so you're going to end up in spam. So over the last 2 years, the way that this has been applied, these rules have been applied in email has actually changed. So at first, what I noticed 2 years ago was, the filter was less about tracking pixels, but it was more about like, okay, what's shady in this email? What is it that this person is doing that somebody who's sending like I'm a Prince in Nigeria emails or phishing emails, like what are the things that these things have in common? And so if you look at what tracking emails are or pixels are and how they're implemented, they're always implemented as display none in CSS, meaning it's an image, but it's invisible. And what's weird about that is it's a 1x1 pixel, so it's already kind of invisible. You can't even see it, right? It doesn't even look like a dirt on a screen, even if it is visible. But if you think about it, why would somebody who's a legitimate sender put an image into an email and then make it hidden? It makes no sense. So this is kind of like one of these themes that's going to keep coming up as we go down these is the goal is you're going to see very frequently not to not look like a marketer. The goal is to not look like a shady person who just happens to do all of these practices in their own way. And so over the years, some of the things that I saw was, okay, I made the tracking pixel visible. Guess what? It did nothing and everything worked fine. And up until October 15th, we were seeing these banners saying, oh, this has an image, this might be sketchy. It would not trip the flag because there's nothing sketchy about it. And then I noticed that if you embedded the image in the middle of the email as opposed to at the bottom or the top, the spam behavior would change. And then, instead of going from a 1x1 pixel to just like actually showing a real image, a legitimate image that looks legitimate. Because again, like legitimate people send images in their emails. There's nothing inherently bad about images, and there's nothing inherently bad about loading them. So that's one example where I actually had a lot of success with tracking email opens, and even today, there's some interesting things you can do with email opens to actually do inbox placement measurement. So this, as a categorical rule, is not really, it doesn't pass the sniff test based on all my experiments. Don't do click tracking. Again, very similar. What is it about click tracking that is so offensive to these systems? Well, it's like I'm getting an email from domain A, I'm clicking on a link, and then I'm going through a sketchy third-party URL domain, and then I'm ending up in a totally different domain. You know who does that? People who are trying to scam you into stealing your PayPal password, right? They send you to paypals.com, which then redirects, they send you from paypal.com, which then redirects you to some other domain. So if you look at that problem and you say, okay, you know what? I'm going to start playing with that equation. It turns out that you can be very, very successful with doing click tracking. And it's not a problem. Don't use images. This is kind of related to tracking email opens. I think that there are two ways of looking at this. One of them is, you guys have probably heard of Eric Nowoslavsky. He's like, look, if it lowers your deliverability rate by 50%, but it increases your reply rate by 200%, why wouldn't I send an image? So like just on that basis, this like rule is just a silly rule, but also on a technical basis, kind of like I said, like every legitimate email I get, every legitimate marketing email I get is full of images. So this as a rule, again, it just goes back to a theme that I'll say at the end of this. Don't use email. Guess what? Like when you send an email from Gmail, it uses HTML. Do you guys know that? So when I'm in Gmail and I send just an email to you, it has an HTML component and a text component. So like just the emails that I send have HTML. So who came up with this thing about HTML being wrong? And then don't bounce emails. I mean, so again, there are caveats to this, but I will tell you, I ran an experiment where from a single inbox and a single domain, I bounced 100,000 emails to Gmail within 24 hours, and I could still deliver. So there's like a lot of nuance to these things. And so I think that there are these blanket wisdoms that are being applied that are designed for that, like just the most basic non-technical person that we all just accept. And I think that we lose a lot of our capabilities in our outbound processes because of them. Like I said, if you don't do click tracking, or if you don't do email open tracking, a lot of people don't realize like you can actually do the most accurate inbox placement measurement using email opens today, using email open tracking. So it's all about how you implement it. So what is it that when you take these like false wisdoms and bring them together, what is the common thread? The common thread that I found is that deliverability, we think of it as like a marketing problem. We think that the people sitting at Outlook and Gmail are sitting there and they're saying like, oh, my job is to filter marketing emails from these people's inboxes, right? Like that's like the goal. So there's an engineering team. And it's like your job is to filter Tarek's email, Sanjay's email, Antoine's email inbox from marketing emails. That's not it. It turns out the real problem that they're trying to solve is cybersecurity. It's a cybersecurity problem. So the real problem is that is not that you want to not look like a spammer. You want to avoid looking like a scammer. And it just so happens that 99% of the practices that we have in cold email today has a one-to-one alignment with what scammers do. So once you realize that and you take a step back and you stop trying to game the system as a marketer and you start trying to say, how do I just look more legitimate? Everything starts to fall into place and you can start to run experiments more freely and get to different conclusions. So I'll pause there, but this is just like an example of kind of my journey over the last 2 years.
And so this is a very good framework indeed. So if you read Errol's blog, I've left a link in the chat. It's one of the better authorities on deliverability that you'll find out there. And so this framework, once you start thinking from the scam filter logic versus the spam filter logic, which Errol explains in his blog, really changes the whole mindset, right? And that's how we come to this sort of myth busting question. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Everyone agrees that those myths were wrong. Now, Errol, if you want, we can move to the next section, which is, please explain to us what is the difference between email 2 and email 3.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two dimensions to email 2.0 and 3.0, and I think one of them is the technical side of things, and the other one is the actual marketing side of things. So the copywriting, the cadence, the outreach strategy, all of that. So what did this look like in email 2.0? So in email 2.0, the marketing sort of cadence, call it, the marketing strategy was all about using email as a relationship building tool. And so what did we see? We saw like, 13 touches over 30 days. And on the other side, we saw a lot of tolerance and acceptance towards that. We saw, and so when I break down tolerance, what does that mean? It was very, very rare for people to report emails as spam back in the day. That was like actually very, very rare. You had to do something actually very scam-like for somebody to go out of their way to do that. So that was kind of like the old email 2.0 framework on the marketing side. On the technical side, it was a lot of these rules that we saw. Just do the basics, just send a plain text email and everything will be fine. What we're seeing now, the thing that I'm seeing transition to now is that, on the marketing side, that sort of contract that people sort of implicitly have with their vendors, that social contract, is sort of no more. And people are hitting the report spam button like crazy today. Gmail is making it easier and more prominent to actually do that, which means that there's a really strong feedback loop into the system. And once you get reported as spam, it was already bad back in the day. That becomes one of the hardest things to break out of. And today it's like the #1 signal. Once somebody reports you as spam today, you're kind of hosed, you're kind of screwed. In addition, today, what I'm noticing on the email 3.0 side is on the technical side is that sort of all of the tricks that used to work no longer work. And I'll give you an example. There used to be tricks where in the email 2.0 world, I would like email you and I would end up in spam, and I would consistently end up in spam. And there were ways to rotate your IP and do certain things to break out of jail. And it was pretty much instantaneous. It was very, very fast. Today, none of those tricks are working anymore. So between the use of generative AI to do email labeling, which everybody's doing. People thought, oh, it's going to be too expensive. They're never going to do it. They're doing it. Between generative AI and between this like really strong feedback loop of user reported feedback, you know, the old sort of conventional wisdoms of how to do email deliverability don't work. So you have to take like a very different approach to how you do email, and that's what we'll talk about in our next webinar.
Got it. Got it. And just as a quick snap, and this way I can fit in Brian's question, what happened to the world where we had 50 mailboxes sending sequences of 7 steps each and so on and so forth? How does that look from now onwards?
Yeah, that's something we'll talk about a lot more, but I think, you know, the new world is kind of, if the old world was about relationship building at scale or trying to use email to build relationships at scale with nurture, I think the new world is going to look a lot more like this is a display ad. Like this is a display ad that shows up in your inbox, no different than if I go to the Yahoo homepage and I see a display ad, or if I go to Instagram and I see a display ad. Now, people say, oh, display ads suck, they don't work. I mean, if anybody here uses Instagram, you know that like they can be scary good. If you've used Amazon, you know that display ads can be scary good, and they can be hyper relevant, and they can be, you know, have a really high click-through rate, and you can have the complete opposite. And that's what we see with email today is you can get really targeted with all of these research platforms like Clay and using generative AI and all of that. So there's this targeting equivalent, and then there is the, you know, you kind of get this one shot to show one message and one compelling offer, and they convert or they don't. I think that's kind of the migration that I'm seeing. By the way, that was always my strategy. So even in email 2.0, that's what we did. So it's a timeless strategy, right? Like moving away from a world where there's 8 steps in the email and they each pitch a totally different value prop, and you don't know which is the right value prop, and you're kind of counting on luck to get it right. That from that world, moving to a world where you're like, I've done my research, I know my value prop, I know that I have the right offer, and I just like show it to you, and you either take it or you don't. And if you don't, I'm still happy with the result because I conclusively know that it's not working, and now I can do something else, as opposed to the other one where it's like maybe they saw email 2 but not 3, or email 1 put this idea in their head that, oh, this is like you know, category A, and so when they read email 2, that's clouded their judgment of what they're reading, so they're no longer reading it. It's really moving, I think, towards this like display ad like medium, and along with that comes a lot of changes, and again, that's what we'll talk about in our next call. But I think it is a way better world. Like I said, honestly, that is what I've done for the last 10 years, and I found it to be crazy effective. And I think that, you know, overall consumers going to win, and the best marketers are going to win.
Excellent. So we have a dedicated event to email 3.0, and we'll be talking about human written custom messages versus AI messages, all in that sort of ad display logic. Let's take one more question, just as that big picture view. So Max, maybe you want to unmute yourself and talk about demand gen merging with outreach.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was curious to hear all thoughts about outbound teams finally reporting to the demand gen or marketing side, because it's becoming more an awareness play rather than middle of the funnel and bottom of the funnel tactics like it was before when it was related to sales.
So is your question like, what is, like, how is that trend happening in terms of who owns what?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, are we going to see more outbound teams finally reporting to the marketing teams or the demand gen team?
Pardon me. So I've gone through one of these cycles where there's kind of like, there was this RevOps thing that came out and was around for like 5-6 years, and it was like, well, this is going to change how we do things, and there's this new title and there's this restructuring. So I have a bit of a different experience, I think, maybe than some other people. So this is just my take. What I learned going through that cycle was that when businesses, I think like businesses, when they're set up a certain way, they find it very, very difficult to change. Like it's just very, very difficult. They get different names, different structures. They point people to different places. But at the end of the day, they kind of do the exact same thing they've always done. And no amount of automation, no amount of AI, no amount of bringing a smart person ever changes that. And I'll give you an example. Like before I went down the solo capitalism route, my first company product was going to be, this was before ChatGPT came out, before all these products came out. I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I know this robotics thing. I'm going to build a tool. I'm going to go into businesses with SDRs, and I'm going to catalog their workflow. And I'm going to use AI and robotics to automate what they do. And I'm going to bring tremendous amount of value, make the business efficient. And right, like that makes a lot of sense. That's kind of what people are talking about today. When I went into these businesses, I'd get 3-4 different SDRs on the call, and I'd say, tell me what you do. Tell me how you do it. And so these 4 SDRs, there's a learning and enablement person in the room. There's a manager, there's process. There's all these people who are expecting to hear, oh yeah, we all kind of do similar things. And they all do something totally different. And when you look into what is the totally different, it's basically like I email call everybody about everything. And I will talk to anybody, period. Because from the outside looking in, I have no visibility into what is the right offer to give these people. Because if I have the right offer and the right business case, I just go to the CEO and I'm like, dude, I can save you all this money. So the reason we have all these SDRs in the first place, it's not even relationship building. It's a research job. And so I was like, okay, if I automate what these people kind of do, you don't even need them. You know what I mean? Because if I can do what they're doing with, if I could come up with the perfect message and just go to the right person and say, I can save you this much money. Are you interested or not? That's the only marketing message that matters. So today, I think there's probably going to be a shuffling. Somebody's going to report to somewhere. Somebody's going to do something. But I think that those people largely are not going to change how they run their businesses, and nothing is going to change. Where it's going to be really interesting and where I'm going to see the change happening is there's this huge movement today of companies that were at Series A and that are starting today that are saying, I am going to run this business. It's going to be a 10 million ARR business with no more than 5 to 10 people. Those people, if you look at the old, cloud, if you look at on-prem to cloud, it's the same pattern. There's still a huge industry. By the way, I'm not saying SDRs will go away, but today there's a huge industry of still on-prem software and on-prem hybrid weird things. But the people who are winning are the people who built their companies post-cloud and were cloud native on day one. So I think where I would spend all my time focusing and looking and trying to ride the wave is to say, there's this new entrepreneur called Errol. He has a company. How can we make that guy 10 times more efficient and capture 20% of the budget? Because it's still going to be a lot of money, right? If you can make revenue per employee $1.5 million using all this stuff, there's a big cake that you can charge a lot of money to capture the pie. So it was a bit of a long way of answering it, but I think it's the takeaway of just what I'm trying to say is regardless of what happens in the way businesses operate today, I would just focus on what is the true revolution that's going to happen, and that's going to be the revenue per employee metric. That's completely changing, and it's already happening. It's not even go on LinkedIn. You're going to find so many people who are yeah, I'm a software developer. I run 10 businesses. AI does all of my customer service. AI does all of my lead gen. AI does all of my SEO. It's already happening. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
Excellent. So in the event in January, we're going to talk a lot about where AI use cases fit in and where customer written email will still be the case, right? So where you apply your SDR and how. Let's go back to the email 2.0 world, since most of us are still living in that world. Errol, so I understand you have a list of takeaways that we can start applying today to just have, a better grip on our deliverability issues. So maybe walk us through those sort of 5 commandments.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these are less commandments and more, I would say, these are the changes that I've started applying as of October 15th. Because like I said, on October 15th, something really, really changed. And I changed my opinion on how to do this. So my old opinion of how to do this was to say, there's only 3 legitimate ways to do outbound from a technical perspective. Number one is to basically do what we've called them email bros in a lot of our conversations. So I don't want to offend anybody when I say email bro, you know who I mean, right? Like, but basically, like, approach one is lots of burner domains, lots of accounts bought from lots of different places, and you just send lots of emails, and then you just kind of let nature do its thing. That's approach one. Approach two, which is something that I learned a while ago, which a lot of people don't think about, is to use SendGrid. Like SendGrid, you're not supposed to use it for cold emails, but you can, especially if you're not being totally stupid with it. Is it the perfect email deliverability tool? No, but is it a great way to just experiment and make a lot of mistakes without having to worry about infrastructure? So that's option two. And option three, which was my favorite and will continue to be my favorite, is to run your own SMTP server. It's really not that complicated to do. It costs me $6 a month to run a single SMTP server. It's really just about finding the right people. And what that gives you is just total control. And so what does that control look like? What that control looks like is when you send an email through Outreach or Smart Lead or Instantly or any of these tools, when they send that email, they talk about like domain rotation and custom domains and stuff, but the truth is they have these like fingerprints that are all over that email and you can't get rid of it. And, they maybe could get rid of it, but honestly, none of those guys are technical enough to know how to do it, because if they did, they would do it and all their problems would be solved. So when you run your own custom SMTP server, you just have total control to basically remove all their fingerprints and do your own thing and kind of be immune to what other people are doing on the platform. So I think that was the old way. The changes that I've seen lately, starting with October 15th, changes on the Gmail platform, people are saying Outlook has had changes around that time period. Honestly, being an SMTP guy, I haven't noticed it, but I'm sure there is. I think the world is sort of shifting towards 3.0, and so these rules are just based on that shift. So number one is just stay away from anything that email bros touch. Like literally just stay away from all of them. Sorry, Tarek, did you have a hand
Yes, actually, for the benefit of the audience, maybe let's make it more explicit, and I'll name them as as I can. Right, most of the people in the audience are using Smart Lead, Instantly, maybe Apollo sequences, maybe Outreach. Right, what do we risk by staying with those platforms? Maybe like describe a doomsday scenario for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. I was experimenting with my custom email. Like I said, I have this custom SMTP server I've been using for the last 2 years, and I was like, maybe I can build a product out of it. And I hooked it up to different people at different platforms, and it was like all the email bro platforms went to spam, which I'd never seen before for my SMTP server. And the ones that are more longer tail, that are less like, crush your market, send lots of emails, oh, we're so clever, those kinds of platforms. Like I'll plug one. I thought Lemlist is kind of one of these things that's used more by SMBs and less technical people and has more reasonable kind of cadences. Scout is another one that I've seen recently. Like Outreach, these are more legit platforms that just have less sketchy behavior. And because your goal is to look less like a scammer, like those guys are implementing all of the scam tactics. I'm not saying they're scamming people. I'm saying that if you have a Venn diagram of like the people who do email phishing and the things that they're doing, there's a very high overlap. And so like almost the naivete of the user of the other platforms, the less features that they have, in a way, is less likely to get you in some sort of trouble. Now, can you be tremendously successful with these platforms? Yes. For me, it's just like, at this point, it's such a commodity. Use the thing that is less overlap with the people with the bad behavior is a good, I think, practice. So those are like two tools that came to mind. Honestly, it's just like anything that is, it's almost like if you go to their website and they have like 100 deliverability features that's all about rotating things and changing things, like I just would not use that. And I don't use that. So just so you guys know, I use Lemlist. I used to use Apollo. I think they're fine. But yeah, like Smart Lead and Instantly, they didn't work for me. They can work for you. But for me, it's like, as these things are getting tighter, go towards the ones that have less of this. I don't know what to use the word. Again, I don't mean to be disparaging. Just like they say, don't use HTML in your emails. This is just my advice.
That's fair, right? And it's fair to have an opinion in a world where the stakes are so high and there's no real absolute truth out there, right? It's only empirical. But so let's transition from this point to the next point in your takeaway. So we have people, we have Sanjay from Greenleaf, we have Victor from Gorgias, we have Aziza from Upfront. These people are sending thousands of emails all the time, right? If they're on these platforms today, so they're on the platform that everyone has access to for $30 a month, what does the roadmap look like to transition to a world where they're not subject to the risk of being bogged down just because everyone else on Smart Lead instantly has been hit?
Yeah, so that's where we come to the second one. It's accept domain rotation as the new normal. I think even if you get all the deliverability stuff right, I think people are just going to hit spam today. They do, like, these platforms make it too easy to, and once they hit spam, you're kind of effed. So I think in email 2.0, I had a very strong opinion where I was like, this is the shady stuff. Don't get into this. It's unnecessarily expensive. It's complex. I think that the bad actors have kind of ruined the market for the good actors. And so now the good actors have to behave a little bit like bad actors. So domain rotation, I think, is the new normal. You're going to send emails. You're going to get it wrong. And when you get it wrong, you are going to end up in spam, and they're not really going to let you break out of it. I think in email 3.0, what we'll talk about is like, okay, in this world where you can no longer really have cohesive sequences, it's like, how do you build marketing campaigns and strategies to actually thrive within that system? That's what we'll talk about in the next strategy. But at least for today, I was the #1 person against domain rotation. I just don't see any way around it today. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Brian, I think, has a good question pertinent to this point. Brian,
Yeah.
maybe unmute yourself and yeah.
Hey, Errol. Yeah, so when you say domain rotation, are you talking about like the kind of tryxyz.com, like different variants of a domain? Okay, and so you're saying that will be something that we'll all have to live with moving forward, is that right?
That's my observation, and it's purely based on the fact that, like I said, today I have been unable to run experiments where somebody reports me as spam, and I live to continue to end up in the inbox the next day. And just so you know, how I run these experiments, they're very time intensive. So what I have is a network of trusted people that run all kinds of different security setups and inboxes. The Glock apps paradigm doesn't work for testing inbox placement. If somebody has questions on that, I'll tell you why. But really, like, from the moment you have a clean domain, the only way to know if you're still delivering is to send a first-time email to somebody who's never seen it in a certain setup and test if it lands in the inbox or not. And so this is why this was like a 2-year, one of the reasons this has been such a long set of experiments for me to run. And like I said, there used to be, in the old paradigm, like up until the first half of this year, at least over the last 2 years, there used to be ways where it's like somebody would report you as spam. Like I tell people sometimes, report me as spam, and then I continue to email within the network, and I would still make it into the inbox. Today, there's a little bit of a time delay, but like I can't get out of spam. So reporting of spam is just like the biggest signal. And what these guys have all done now is, like, especially in Gmail, is they've made reporting spam so easy and so prominent that somebody's going to do it. So, I think the only way around that is to say, well, I need new domains.
Because, we've been in business for 10 years, right? We don't have a huge market, so we don't have to send like 1 million emails a month or anything like that. And, we spend a lot of money on branding. We go to trade, like we sell into higher education institutions. There's not that many of them. We spend a lot of money, trade shows, branding. Our main domain is all over those. And so, like, it's only ever been email bros thus far that have suggested that we rotate domains. And so I found it very difficult to go to our CEO and be like, hey, that brand you've built up over years, like, we need 20 more domains that are kind of similar to that, because there's the data behind it just isn't that robust. And so, like, is there anything that's non-email bro that you would use to, like, imagine your PayPal, right? Or imagine your IBM and you want to do some cold emailing. Are they going to go out and buy like trypaypal.com, tryxyz.com? Because arguably that comes across as a bit more spammy too, right? So like, how do you kind of merge those two streams of thought?
Great question. And you said that like you're in education, is that right?
Yeah. So we're a SaaS software provider that
Yeah.
sells into universities and colleges.
Yeah. So good point. So my answer to this is, again, it goes back to there's no rule that applies to everybody. People say cold calling doesn't work. Cold calling works really well if you sell into restaurants and small businesses and you know how to do it. And my first instinct is, you've been around a long time. You probably have a good reputation. You probably have some brand recognition in your market when people get an email. And it may be that those people are, their behavior hasn't changed the way other people's have to just like report you as spam. I'm purely hypothesizing. What I know is that when somebody reports you as spam, you're effed. So you have to know your own customers and you have to know what works and what doesn't. What I would offer is just like the way to test it, right? The way to test it is build a network of trusted people and send emails and just make sure you're getting into the inbox, or something I can share offline. Probably like some things I don't want to share with the world, but like there are ways to measure inbox placement with open tracking. So like if your inbox placement is great, you don't need to rotate it. What I'm more addressing is like there used to be a way that you could kind of run more experimental outbound and get it wrong, and the punishment wasn't so severe. So to you, my suggestion would be like, and I would never say you need hundreds of domains, right? Like if you need hundreds of domains, you're already doing it completely wrong. I'm more like, have a second, have a third, like always have a backup plan, right? Always have an emergency exit. If you need 50 or 100, the way the email bros are kind of talking about it, I would say you're not doing marketing right. Like, take that effort and fix your list, fix your message, like put some thought into it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah. It does answer my question. And like, maybe we'll talk about this on the next one, but like I've been spending a ton of time writing an email that could not be identified as spam. Because like what we're doing is like we're looking at a lot of our past interaction with these institutions, and we can name check like people that we've spoken to in the past, or like if I can see like this CTO was at like 2 events we attended at last year because I have those attendee lists, I'm gonna name drop it like, hey, like we didn't get a chance to catch up when you were in like XYZ, and so like I'm trying to get around being tagged as spam using the content of the email. As opposed to having 50 domains, but it looks like there's maybe, a halfway house between maybe not 50 domains, but having a couple of backups if you're saying that, that spam flag is such a big deal these days.
I mean, for you, I would be like, just keep doing what you're doing, because I mean, what you're doing is you're saying that your email behavior is like very, very human-like and very advanced, right? Like, even if I try to hash or say, hey, AI, check this email versus the last time that was sent, I'm going to get something totally different. So I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. I'm more talking about like the average person who's like, I've identified this list. I haven't, I've really done my homework, right? One of the things we'll talk about in email 2.0 is like, or 3.0 is if your list is more than 300 people, build a better list so that at scale, like your scale is lots of 300-person lists rather than one 3,000-person list. In your case, I don't think you need to. I don't think you need to worry about that.
Good. Thanks.
So,
yeah. And if it helps, I have 10 domains. Like, and I have yet to fall back to a secondary, but again, it's because like we'll talk. This is something for the next session, but like for me, I send an email where like it's the perfect email, and step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in my sequence is literally the same email because I know it is the perfect email. And so if I didn't get the right response that I wanted, the only thing that it could be is they didn't see it or the timing was wrong, but it's still the right message. By the way, I didn't come up with this. Somebody taught me this a couple years ago, or no, like 5-6 years ago. I'm getting older, but I mean, because of that, I've never had this problem myself. And like I said, my recommendation to people who are in the experimental phase is to use SendGrid anyway. So yeah. But what I'm saying, except domain rotation as the new normal, is it like, I guess SendGrid counts as domain rotation too, right? Like, so it's more for the experimental side of things.
And also, let's so there's two things I want to do. First, I want to talk about what you mean by, say, care less about landing in spam. And secondly, there's a very good question from Victor, and I'm going to keep Victor on hold just for a couple of minutes, which goes back to how to set up this custom SMTP bit and orchestrate the whole thing, right? So let's talk about maybe what do you mean by care less about landing in spam? What does that mean?
Yeah, so this came out of a firsthand experience where I was trying to debug an issue, and I asked somebody in my net. I set up an email server for somebody to send custom SMTP emails. They were landing in spam, and I wanted to send a test, and I sent an email to somebody in my network to say, hey, I'm just sending a test email. Can I send it? You tell me if it lands in spam or not. I sent the email, and he was like, wait a minute, I've seen this email. Like, they were like, oh, this is that from that company? And I was like, what do you mean you've seen the email? He's like, oh, I saw it in my spam folder. And I was like, wait a minute, you check your spam folder? And he's like, yeah, I kind of like, because like real emails go to spam now. So then I went on LinkedIn and I put up a survey, and it was like N equals 100, not a huge sample, but I was like, what percentage of you check your inbox or your spam folder more than once a week? And it was like 40% of people. And what I'm just noticing is that kind of like in your mail, like in your physical mail, you get spam and you get it and it's not a big deal. And you make a spam file and a whatever file or pile, and you look at it to see if there's an interesting offer there. And there's ways to make those offers compelling. So for example, I own my home, I get offers. Now they write the offer on the outside of the letter, so I don't even have to open it, which is not too different than having a great subject line in a preview text. So I think like in the old world, I used to just be obsessed with like not falling in spam. I think now that people are more willing to report it as spam, they're also more likely to check their spam folder. So I wouldn't be too like overly crazy about it. Like I used to be a perfectionist. Now I'm just like, if it's the right email, like I said, make it the right person and the right email. If you get that, just send it and then send it again and again and again. And eventually like they will see it and it will be fine. So that's what I mean.
And by extension, so if I have a mailbox that goes to spam, and now that I can't get out of it as of October, I should keep on using it because there might still be juice from people still checking their spam.
Again, I'm more interested in letting you know my observations, and you can make the decision. This is not advice, but I mean, this is a behavior of mine that I have changed since October 15th, where I'm like, you know what? This is a new behavior. Like people used to never check their spam, right? People would be like, check spam, and they'd say, I don't even know how to do that. And I think that has changed. If you're in a market, like maybe Brian, in your market, people are still like, I don't even know where the spam folder is. And maybe that's why you don't have that problem. But either way, you know, just send the email. Like just send I'm more worried about sending the thing that gives them the wrong impression of what you do, and that makes them think that you are awful. Like that's more what I'm worried about than, you know, micromanaging everything and being super perfectionist.
Got it. So this is a good time to come to Victor's question, right? So there's the two-part question. I'll answer the first part because Errol is too nice. So who are email bros? Are basically people who are influencers who talk about deliverability, right? And some influencers also have their own tool because they use their own sort of knowledge to build a tool for it. And so tools that have ready access for the whole world and cost like $20 a month sometimes are run by what we call email bros. So that's what Errol is talking about. The rest you can deduce yourself. Then for the second part of the question, Victor, if you could unmute yourself, tell us about your question and maybe also the general deliverability challenge you're having at Gorgias. I know Guillaume just joined, so either of you can unmute to tell us so we can profit from it altogether.
Yeah, sure. So hi, Harold. It's very interesting. Thanks a lot. Nice to meet you. I have a question about the SMTP providers because we tried on our side to use like SMTP. The only thing that like we are gathering all our responses. We are basically like using our own tool, Gorgias, to centralize all our responses. So with Gmail, Outlook is pretty well integrated. But when it comes to SMTP servers, then like it's almost impossible to plug them, or at least with the one we use, which is Mailreef. And so my question is like, how do you, first of all, like from the SMTP server, like how do you send the emails? Like, do you use the API directly? How do you orchestrate all of this? And how do you track it then? How do you manage the responses?
So if you have a good SMTP if you have a good SMTP setup, SMTP has a standard interface for sending emails, and for like every SMTP server will generally have an idea of an inbox, and most mail software will allow you to kind of do some aliasing where the mail server actually treats a single inbox as the thing that's related to all the different emails. So it's actually very configurable out of the box. Like, I think if you want to talk offline about specifics, like I can show you how I have it implemented and whatever, but if they're doing it right, SMTP is like the most flexible thing out there. It's like more flexible than the Gmail API. It's more flexible than the Outlook API. So everything is possible. I don't know the specifics of Mailreef or some of the other ones because I don't use them, but I can tell you for me, like I have set up my server to basically alias it all to, or no, sorry. I use my server to basically have different inboxes, and then those inboxes, I just have one single email client that allows me to add many different IMAP accounts. And then, like, for example, in Gmail, like I can view all inboxes, even though they're different inboxes. I just have like a single place and I can reply from any of the inboxes. So that's just what I do.
Okay, so we are in a world where you are replying directly to your outbound emails, or you are replying to the response yourself.
Yeah.
Like you don't. Okay.
But I mean, again, like if you use something like Front, for example, as a paradigm, like Front lets you have lots of inboxes that are shared, and each one can be connected to an SMTP, and then you can collaboratively like comment and assign. So it really, I mean, SMTP is the most flexible thing out there. If you're struggling with it, I'm happy to like kind of brainstorm with you a little bit into the specifics, but like you should be able to achieve whatever you want with it. It's so flexible.
Okay, so now I know that it's possible, so I need to deep dive. Thank you. Maybe G, you can add the.
No, but I
Go ahead,
think
Guillaume. Vas-y.
sorry. Just to follow up on this, I think our problem, Victor, is that Mailreef is using his own SMTP, and we plugged our email into Gorgias, so Front basically, which use like another SMTP server, which is Belgian or SendGrid, and so Mailreef was like, no, don't plug your email in like your help desk, because otherwise like it will be like basically a competition against my Mailreef SMTP. I mean, I can't remember, but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
if you match, I don't know. Like
No,
maybe a role on this like if for example we have like Mailreef and then we plug to Front, it will be the same issue. Like Front is using as well like dedicated SMTP server, no, like to outbound.
No, I mean they should just send it over the
Okay.
inbox that it's connected to. So
yeah, so maybe
like, that would be
maybe
to me this just sounds
Gorgias.
like a configuration issue, not a. It should send, like there's no difference between sending over SMTP through Gmail or over the like it's the exact same architecture.
Yeah,
It's the
okay. No,
exact same
but I think
architecture. The only place it gets a little weirder is, for example, is like there's ways to have an SMTP server that manages multiple domains. I think most of these vendors, I think they give you a dedicated server which each has their own IP for each domain. So then maybe you need to do some aggregation on your side between all those, versus like in my case, I have many domains on one server, many IPs on one server. software is built in a way that it's smart enough to do everything, and then it all funnels into one inbox on the server, and then that syncs as one inbox to the other side. So there's just like many ways to do it, is my point. It's extremely flexible. Like there in SMTP world, there is no you can't. There really isn't. They're just like, they don't want to do it, or they won't do it. Or they don't know how to do it.
Excellent. So that's good for you, Guillaume and Victor. Let's give the mic to Sanjay. Sanjay has a good question we haven't addressed yet, but I think it interests all of us. Sanjay, maybe begin with the bigger deliverability challenge you have at Greenly, and then ask a question.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So at Greenly, we got two kind of domain, old one and a new one. The old one got 4 years ago, basically, and the new one are being created this year. So they are pretty new. Currently, we are using Limlist as a sales engagement tool. And I was wondering how many email we can send on daily basis. With the old one, we can send up to 100 email per day, and on several new domain, we got 10 new domain. Basically, we are sending up to 30 email per day. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I go back to the framework of just look normal. Like what would a normal business that has your inbound and outbound traffic look like in terms of that? I would just go with that. So for me, like most businesses, you won't have a single person send more than 100 emails a day. Like that's a very busy day, and then those people are sending email throughout the day, and they're all very different. All kinds of things. And people say, oh, write short email, whatever. Like the emails I write are pretty long, like in my business world, right? Like, and they're very very varied, and they have lots of image. So I think of it as just depending. Look at Brian, like he has a very different. You have a use case, you have a different use case. I don't know, but I would just say, try to make it look, reasonable. Whatever feels right to you is probably the right answer. What you just don't want to look like is a scammer. And and on that note, by the way, one thing that always comes up is email warming. So email warming actually does absolutely jack nothing. It's just totally useless. If anything, it hurts you. Everybody in the space says the same thing, except for one place. And I'll be honest, I haven't tested this, but I do know that lots of volatility is bad for deliverability. That I'm pretty sure of. Again, well, I'll say I don't know it. I'm pretty sure volatility is bad. So the only place I would use email warming is where I have volatility in my campaign. So if you're like, I do this big blast and then I do nothing, I may use email warming to just like keep some deliverability going. I'll tell you where I saw this too. So when I said I suspect it, I saw Yahoo behave this way, where I did this, like I was running lots of experiments at the time against personal email addresses, and Yahoo actually gave me an SMTP error saying it was something like too big a spike. So I know that somebody out there has some behavior that measures this. I remember thinking email warming would have probably solved for this, purely for that basis. Like nothing to do with this whole, oh, we take you out of spam and we like, that's all bullshit. I guarantee you it doesn't work. If anything, it can only hurt you. But on the like keeping your volume sort of level, I think that's not a bad idea.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. So we have time for one more question before we wrap up. I know that Antoine from Pigment has joined, and I know that deliverability is a big topic at the organization. Is there something that you'd like to ask Antoine? Maybe we could benefit from Errol's presence, if Antoine is still there.
Actually, yeah. Hello. Thank you for this session. Very interesting for me. Actually, I don't have really a precise question. Like we have like basic deliverability issue, and we don't exactly know how to track it, how to measure it, and how to crack it, obviously. But yeah, this SMTP custom server looks like an interesting solution. We could think about it.
Can I
And,
can I ask you how do you know you guys have a problem? This is always the first question that I ask, and it's always really interesting. Like, how do you guys know you have a deliverability problem?
Well, first we have like very high bounce rates, like between over 10% sometimes. So probably an issue with the email
So
providers. Yeah.
sorry to cut you off. You can actually check that. So not to plug my own product, but trykit.ai actually has. So, okay, because I run this 2-year study, one of the first things I had to control for was to measure what is a true bounce and what is a fake bounce, right? Because like, again, you have to have some sort of feedback loop to be like, I did X and the Y happened. Do you guys all know what a fake bounce is? Basically, the server's like, okay, a fake bounce is like, again, this is about cybersecurity. If you send an email to me and I tell you this email is not real, like maybe you'll go away. You know what I mean? Versus like if I leave it in spam, like you'll keep emailing me. But if it's like I bounce you, you'll just go away. So that's a fake bounce. So there's a way in email validation, like trykit.ai calls it, we call it identity verification, where you actually check not what the email server is saying, but what the identity server is saying. So the identity server will be like, no, this guy's actually still not there. So that's one way to check if your bounces are legitimate or not.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like I have Okta and then I have Gmail. So if Gmail might be, well, Gmail doesn't do this, but I have Okta and I have whatever SMTP server. The SMTP server may reject me, but like I'll know that on the Okta server, it will be like, no, Antoine still works here. This is still good.
Yeah. I see. Interesting, actually. Yeah, the identity server. I didn't think about it.
So Errol, let's start towards wrapping up. So preface, we do have a much larger event, which will be much more sort of pedagogical in January about how to do email 3.0. So there's a whole thing to unpack there. In the meanwhile, please read Errol's blog. It's amazing. So you'll find a lot more insights that you found here during the talk. Just before we finish, Errol, so we're also thinking of shipping the integration with Trykit AI. How should we use the API for Trykit?
Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. For the email, so Trykit is basically the anchor of all of my research because again, you have to start with like, what is the action, what is the result, and how do I validate it? So it should perform. Take your best email finder. It will have just about the same find rate, but a much lower bounce rate for 3/4 less price. So it's very like it's built to be faster, cheaper, and better. Find email will only return something if it's pre-verified. And like I said, should have crazy low bounce rate. On the verification side, you'll have identity, like I said, and SMTP verification. Some things SMTP can't verify. You'll go with identity verification. And this is all inside the product. But basically, they're these two flags that you can use, and then based on that, you can make certain choices. So like, for example, with banks, no matter what you do, you can never get an SMTP verified. So you're like, okay, do I use identity verified in my campaign? And then, the recommendation inside of our documentation says, if this is a low-level position with lots of turnover, don't use it. If it's like C-level, VP level, director level, like you may see a bounce rate, but it's probably not going to be very, very high. That's the gist of it. Otherwise, it works the same as everything else. It integrates, has an HTTP API, CSV upload, whatever.
Excellent. That's a great way to end with the call to action. So you can play with the API for Trykit. And we're also going to ship an integration with Cargo, so you can use that within the tool as well. I always say this to end these events, but it's true. Errol is a living, breathing member of the GTM engineers community. You're all on it. So please feel free to sort of use his advice there. Ping him, maybe on a public channel, maybe privately. And there he can actually give you like practical advice on your specific challenges. So he's been experimenting like hands-on for the last 2 years. There's very few people in the world who can claim to have that. And so he's distilled all of that either into his knowledge or into his product. So let's make sure we leverage Errol enough amongst us. Any last words, Errol, before we say goodbye?
Yeah, like I said, my goal today was to just help you guys just with the framework. So, again, the framework is, I would say, just to summarize, don't worry about, just try to not look like a scammer. Don't worry about being a spammer. Trust your instincts. Just think about it from the customer perspective and what sketchy looks like. And if you just avoid doing those things, you're probably more right than all of the experts that you read about. And I think Brian was the perfect person to just give a counterexample and show like there are no absolute rules. So if you guys just feel empowered a little bit to push back on the wisdom that you've heard and try things out, then I will be very happy with what we've achieved.
Excellent. With that, Errol, I thank you so much for taking the time to come talk to us. Thank you, GTM engineers, for making your time to speak, and for people tuning into this async. We'll be back with another event in the next couple of weeks, most likely right after Christmas. We'll keep you posted there. Meanwhile, have a good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone joining from around the world. Thank you. Thank you, Errol.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hi guys, thanks.